I found out I was pregnant in a Walmart bathroom, clutching a discount test with trembling hands while the muffled cry of a toddler echoed from the next stall. My knees buckled the moment I saw those two pink lines. Not because I was scared, I wasn't. But because deep down I knew this moment was going to change everything. I just didn't know how much it would cost me. My name is Alina, and I used to believe that love could fix anything. That if you were kind, loyal, and forgiving, life would reward you for it. That belief nearly destroyed me. I met Jason during my final year of nursing school. He was charming in that effortless boy-next-door way, clean-cut, soft-spoken, always the first to pull out a chair or open a door. He'd just finished his MBA, fresh into the world of finance with dreams taller than the buildings he worked in. I fell fast and hard. Our love moved quickly. Within a year, we were married in a modest church ceremony with fairy lights and mismatched chairs. I wore my mother's veil. Jason's mother, Dolores, wore white. A red flag if I'd known then what I know now. Dolores never liked me. She masked it well in front of Jason, tight smiles and backhanded compliments. But when it was just the two of us, her eyes would narrow and the mask would fall. She'd tell me Jason could have done better, that I wasn't quite their kind of girl, that I should just be grateful he chose someone like me. So I tried. I really tried. I brought her soup when she was sick. I helped clean her house before holidays. I sat through her endless, condescending stories about how Jason's ex-girlfriend was Ivy League educated and came from a real family. I smiled through it all, believing, naively, that kindness would eventually win her over. But nothing I did ever seemed enough. When I told Jason I was pregnant, he cried. He kissed my stomach and whispered, "We're going to be the best parents." And for a brief, beautiful moment I thought I was safe. Jason doted on me throughout the pregnancy. He read baby books aloud, rubbed my swollen feet, and even made a tiny crib with his own two hands. Dolores, meanwhile, barely acknowledged the pregnancy. She'd roll her eyes when Jason talked about baby names and once even asked if I was sure it was his. I should have walked out then. But I didn't. Because I loved Jason. And because I believed a child might bring us all closer. The day I gave birth was the most painful and most beautiful day of my life. I held my son against my chest, counted all his fingers and toes, and thought, this is it. This is my family. Jason cried. I cried. Dolores didn't even show up. 3 days later, she waltzed into the hospital room with a smirk and a gift bag. Inside was a onesie that read, 50% daddy, 50% perfection. I ignored the chill in my spine. I had no idea she was already planning to rip my life apart. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that while I was nursing my newborn and recovering from stitches, Dolores was quietly whispering poison into Jason's ear. About how the baby didn't look like him. About how I got pregnant too fast. About how she heard things from a friend in town. Jason changed. Subtly at first. He stopped looking me in the eyes. He came home later than usual. He stopped touching me altogether. When I asked what was wrong, he just said, "Work's been crazy." But I knew. I felt it in my gut. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. The final blow came 6 weeks after the birth. I was folding laundry, humming to myself, when Jason walked in with a look I'd never seen before, cold, distant, almost disgusted. He held out a piece of paper. A paternity test. It said he wasn't the father. I remember laughing. I actually laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Jason's face didn't change. "I'm sorry," he said flatly. "My mom insisted we check." "It's not mine, Alina." The floor disappeared. The room spun. I couldn't breathe. I screamed that it was a lie. That he was wrong. That I had never cheated. But he didn't care. He packed my bags. He handed me my crying baby, our son, and told me to leave. And I did. Because I was too broken to fight. Too confused to argue. Too shattered to stand up for myself. But I wasn't going to stay broken forever. And neither Jason nor Dolores knew what I would uncover next. Or how everything they built would come crashing down. I remember the way his mother looked at me at the wedding, like I was a stain on her white carpet. She smiled for the pictures, sure, even gave a tearful toast. But behind those well-practiced expressions was a woman who had already decided I wasn't good enough for her son. First it was subtle. She'd forget to invite me to family dinners, then insist it was a mistake. She'd correct the way I held the baby, the way I seasoned food, the way I breathed. She was in our house constantly, helping, she said, but it felt more like surveilling. So I tried. I smiled. I thanked her. I let her overstep because I loved Jacob. I believed love meant compromise. But looking back, I was the only one compromising. It started to shift a few months after I gave birth to our son, Liam. I was still recovering, still figuring out how to be a mother, still trying to exist in a body that no longer felt like mine. Jacob was distant, more than tired, more than stressed. He started staying late at work, and when I asked about it, he'd get defensive. I'm working for us, Emery. For Liam. Why do you always have to make me feel guilty for trying? So I backed off. I always backed off. But then little things started disappearing. Receipts. Bank statements. Passwords stopped working. I chalked it up to stress, my own forgetfulness, postpartum fog. But something in my gut kept pulling. Whispering. Warning. And then the test happened. Jacob came home one evening looking grave. He sat me down on the couch, hands trembling slightly, and told me we needed to talk. There's something we have to deal with, he said, his voice low and tight. My mom. She asked me to do something and I did it. I didn't want to believe her, but, Emery, I had to be sure. I blinked. What are you talking about? He slid an envelope across the coffee table. Inside was a paternity test. He couldn't even look at me when he said it. Liam, he's not mine. I felt like the floor vanished beneath me. For a moment I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. What? Jacob, that's insane. Why would you even? He stood up and stepped back from me like I was poison. Don't lie to me. I don't even know who you are anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This man who held my hand through labor, who named our son with me, was now accusing me of cheating. Based on what? His mother's paranoia? I clutched the test in my hand, feeling the blood drain from my face. This has to be a mistake. That's your son, Jacob. You know it. I don't know anything anymore, he said and turned away. The next few days were a blur. He moved into the guest room. He stopped speaking to me except in clipped, cold sentences. His mother started coming by more often, hovering, smirking like a cat who got the cream. She took over Liam's care whenever she could, acting like she had all the authority now. I tried to plead with Jacob to show him how little sense this made. But he wouldn't listen. The trust we once had was shattered, and I could feel the foundation of our marriage collapsing with every cold glance. Then came the lawyer. Jacob handed me divorce papers less than 2 weeks later. His mother had arranged everything: custody proposals, asset divisions. And worst of all, he was demanding a DNA test to legally confirm I had no claim to custody. I was stunned, devastated, but mostly I was confused. This wasn't just about doubt anymore. It was a surgical removal of me from my own life, my marriage, my home, and now my son. The worst part was when she said it to my face. I had just come back from a desperate meeting with an attorney, trying to figure out what the hell my rights were. I walked into the house and found her rocking Liam in the nursery, humming a lullaby like she was his mother. You've done enough, she said without even turning around. You're lucky I'm here to pick up the pieces. I stared at her, every muscle in my body vibrating with rage. You're destroying my family. She finally turned and her eyes, cold, gleaming, met mine. No, dear, she said softly. I'm saving it. That was the moment the fog lifted. She wasn't just overbearing or meddling. She had orchestrated this. Manipulated Jacob. Lied. And he'd bought every word. And now she was trying to erase me completely. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, Liam's stuffed giraffe clutched to my chest, and I cried until my face felt raw. But beneath the grief, something else stirred. I didn't know how yet and I didn't know when, but I was going to find out the truth. And I was going to take my life back. No matter what it cost. By the time I moved into the one-bedroom apartment, it was like I was living someone else's life. The sterile white walls, the quiet creaks of a space that wasn't mine, it all felt like a punishment for sins I hadn't committed. Every night, I laid on that thin mattress with my arms wrapped tightly around my belly, whispering promises to my unborn child that we would be okay. I didn't know how, but I needed to believe it. There's a strange kind of silence that follows betrayal. It's not peace. It's like the world has turned down its volume, and every memory screams louder in your head to fill the void. I kept playing the moments over and over. How Jacob avoided my eyes, how Barbara looked at me like I was nothing, how they both acted like I'd brought shame into their perfect lives. But the thing that gnawed at me most was the test. That paternity test. The paper Jacob had waved in my face had looked so official, but it felt wrong. My gut told me something wasn't right. He refused to show me the actual results, only a scanned screenshot on his phone. And Barbara, she was all too eager to push me out once that piece of paper appeared. I knew Jacob had flaws. He was selfish, impulsive, quick to anger, but he wasn't stupid. So either he was delusional or someone he trusted had manipulated him. And there was only one person who came to mind. Barbara. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces clicked together. She was the one who suggested the DNA test. She was the one who insisted on handling the logistics. And when the results came back, she was already ready with my bags packed. No hesitation. No questions. Just exile. I felt it in my bones. She had tampered with the results. I didn't have proof, not yet, but I had something just as powerful. Instinct sharpened by pain. Still, I had no money, no job, and barely enough energy to stand upright some days. I wasn't in a position to go charging into battle. Not yet. I needed to heal first. I needed to survive. I got a part-time job at a small bookstore run by a sweet older woman named Kathy who didn't ask questions when I showed up puffy-eyed and quiet. She just handed me a schedule and pointed me to the register. The work was slow, the hours long, but it gave me just enough to cover groceries and bills. More than that, it gave me space to breathe. One slow Tuesday afternoon, a customer left behind a manila envelope at the checkout. I chased after him, but he was already gone. When I returned inside and flipped it open, my heart skipped. Inside were documents from a private testing facility, DNA comparison reports. I stared at them, frozen. Different names, a different story. But it got me thinking. If I could track down the lab Barbara claimed to use, maybe I could ask some questions. Quietly. Discreetly. That night, I went through old texts on Jacob's laptop, one I'd taken with me during the move. Thankfully, he hadn't changed the password. Buried in his messages, I found a forwarded email from the lab. And even better, a phone number. I didn't call them, not yet. I researched everything I could about the company. I learned how the reports were generated, how samples were processed. It all led me to one terrifying truth. If someone intercepted the result before it reached the recipient, they could submit a doctored version. All you needed was access to a PDF editor and an email address similar to the lab's. My stomach churned. It didn't take long before I confirmed it. The lab hadn't sent the report directly to Jacob. It had been sent to Barbara. She'd claimed it was easier that way. I was furious. Sick to my core. She'd faked the results. Lied to her son. Torn apart a family before it had even begun. And Jacob? He never even double-checked. But I still had no way to prove it, until Kathy, my boss, handed me a lifeline. One of her customers was a forensic document examiner. He offered consultations for free sometimes just to keep his skills sharp. He gave me his card and I almost cried right there in the shop. The next week I brought in everything I had. Screenshots, timelines, emails. He took one look and asked a few quiet questions before leaning back in his chair and nodding. "There's evidence of forgery here," he said. "This file, this isn't original. Someone altered it." I remember gripping the edge of his desk to keep from collapsing. I had the truth now. Cold, hard, undeniable truth. But I wasn't going to run to Jacob. No. Not yet. He made his choice. He left me homeless. He spat on my loyalty and discarded our child like trash. No, this wasn't about fixing things. This was about letting them fall apart the way they were always meant to. And I would be there standing tall when it happened. When I opened the envelope, my hands were trembling so badly I almost tore it in half. Inside were the results of the real DNA test. The one I had ordered in secret without telling anyone. Not even my best friend. Not even my lawyer. Just me. Alone. Because after everything I'd been through, after all the lies, I needed to hold the truth in my hands, raw and undeniable. And there it was in black and white. 99.999% probability of paternity. Jonathan Reynolds. The same man who had screamed in my face that I was a liar. The same man who took my baby girl from me, packed up my things while I was still reeling, and filed for divorce citing irreconcilable differences stemming from infidelity. The same man who watched me fall apart stone-faced, while his mother smirked like she'd won. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt nothing. Or maybe it was everything all at once, so loud and heavy in my chest that it numbed me. How dare they? How dare she? I had been gaslit, humiliated, isolated. Branded with a lie so heavy it nearly broke me. I'd lost friends. I'd lost my dignity. And nearly, God help me, my will to live. But now the truth sat in my hands. My daughter was Jonathan's. He had always been. It wasn't just about proving myself anymore. It was about my child, the one I carried for 9 months and brought into this world with love, only to have her ripped away by the people who were supposed to protect us. And now I had the ammunition I needed. Not for revenge, but for justice. I sent the results to my attorney that night. I remember pressing send and staring at the screen for a long moment, like I expected it to catch fire. It didn't. But the world around me began to shift almost immediately. The first call came 2 days later, from Jonathan. His voice cracked like old wood when he asked, "Can we talk?" I let him sit in silence for a while before I answered. "No," I said. "Not unless it's through my lawyer." Then I hung up. But that was only the beginning. My attorney moved fast, petitioning the court for an emergency hearing with the new evidence. The judge, a stern woman with eyes like polished glass, listened carefully as my lawyer laid it all out. The forged test. The timeline. The suspicious behavior. The fact that Jonathan's mother, a retired nurse with just enough know-how to be dangerous, had been the one to submit the original results. When the judge turned to Jonathan and asked him, "Did you ever witness the collection of the DNA sample?" He looked like a cornered animal. "No," he admitted. "My mother handled it." The courtroom gasped. I just sat still, my hands clasped in my lap like a prayer. From that moment the scales tipped. The judge ordered a full investigation into the paternity fraud and reinstated my custody rights immediately, pending a formal hearing. My daughter would be returned to me within 48 hours. That night, when I held her for the first time in months, she curled into me like we had never been apart. She was still so small, still smelled like sweet milk and innocence. I cried then, not because I was sad, but because for the first time I knew we were going to be okay. But karma wasn't done yet. 3 weeks later, Jonathan's mother was indicted for fraud and obstruction. She'd tampered with legal documents, submitted a falsified DNA report, and had conspired to defraud the court. Her license, though she'd been retired, was revoked permanently. Her name was splashed all over the news as a cautionary tale of how far hate can twist a person. Jonathan tried to apologize. He came to my door one rainy afternoon, soaking wet, his eyes hollow. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear I just believed her. I thought you thought I'd cheat on you?" I interrupted steady. He looked down at his shoes like a scolded boy. "I was scared," he whispered. "Scared to be a father. Scared of the truth." "Well," I said, stepping back into the doorway, "now you get to live with it." I closed the door before he could say anything else. Because by then I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even bitter. I was free. And I had my daughter in my arms and a new life opening ahead of us like the first break of light after a storm. Jonathan had taken everything in the divorce. But he forgot the one thing that could ruin him. The truth. And now it was mine. The day the custody ruling became permanent, I stood in that same courtroom where I had once felt so small, and this time, I held my head high. The judge's gavel came down like a thunderclap. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to the mother, Ms. Emerson. Visitation rights are suspended indefinitely, pending psychological evaluation and a separate hearing. Jonathan didn't even flinch. He just nodded like a man too hollow to fight anymore. I glanced over at him as I rose from my seat. He looked like a ghost of the man I'd once loved, haunted, sunken, and gray. I should have felt pity. I didn't. Because now he knew what it was like to lose everything. He'd once watched me cry alone in the dark, shamed me in front of our friends, told everyone I'd cheated when I hadn't even looked at another man. His mother had handed him the lie and he swallowed it whole. And when I begged him to believe in me, he chose her. Now he would go back to that same house, big and empty, where the silence would gnaw at him the way his betrayal had gnawed at me for months. His bank account might be full, but his heart? That was bankrupt. And my daughter? She was safe. Home. With me. She slept curled up beside me that night, her tiny fingers tangled in mine. I watched her chest rise and fall and realized I could finally breathe again too. But healing didn't come overnight. I still woke up sometimes with phantom memories. His mother's cold glare, Jonathan's raised voice, the sound of the front door slamming after he tossed out my suitcases. I'd been made to feel disposable. Crazy. Like some villain in a story where I was really the hero all along. I started therapy, not just for me but to be the strongest mother I could be. Each session was like peeling back a bandage over a deep wound. But with every painful truth came clarity. And peace. I began to understand just how much I'd sacrificed, how much of myself I'd given up trying to keep a man who had no intention of fighting for me. Slowly, I reclaimed every piece. I went back to work, launching the small home design business I had shelved when I got pregnant. My first client was a friend from college who said she remembered how passionate I'd been about interiors back then. It was like she'd reminded me of a version of myself I had forgotten. The confident one. The creative one. The woman who used to light up a room. That woman was coming back. Not just for me but for my daughter. And as for Jonathan? Well, the scandal followed him like a storm cloud. Word got out about the fake DNA test. His job in tech sales, where reputation meant everything, slowly dried up. Clients pulled out. Promotions were rescinded. The man who once threw me away to maintain his image was now watching his own fall apart. He tried to reach out again. Once. Through a mutual friend. He's saying he was manipulated by his mom. That he didn't know what she was doing. I smiled sadly. Tell him, I said, sometimes the people who fail to protect you are worse than the ones who hurt you. But as I meant it. Jonathan could have asked questions. Could have demanded proof. Could have stood beside me. Instead, he left me bleeding in the wreckage of his mother's lies. And now, the court had barred him from contacting our daughter until further notice. He was required to complete a full psychological evaluation, attend parental counseling, and submit monthly reports before any visitation would even be considered. It felt like justice. Not just for me but for my child. But the greatest revenge? It wasn't the court rulings. It wasn't the scandal or the consequences or the headlines. It was the life I had built after. I started documenting our journey, quietly, anonymously, on a blog. I shared what it felt like to be wrongly accused, to be torn from your baby, to fight like hell just to be seen again. Women started messaging me. Their stories were heartbreaking and eerily similar. I wasn't alone. And neither were they. The blog exploded. And suddenly, I wasn't just a single mom with a broken past. I was a voice for women who'd been erased, betrayed, gaslit, silenced. People began inviting me to speak. At women's groups. At domestic advocacy events. Even legal panels. Funny, isn't it? The same voice they tried to silence became the one thing they couldn't shut out. My past didn't define me anymore. It fueled me. I went from broken to bold. From discarded to dangerous. And every time I looked at my daughter's face, I was reminded that the truth will always find its way to the surface, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. Because they tried to erase me. But they forgot. I was the one holding the pen. It was a sunny Saturday morning when I took my daughter to our favorite park. The one with the big oak tree and the squeaky carousel. She ran ahead of me, her curls bouncing, her laughter trailing through the air like a song I thought I'd never hear again. And I just stood there for a moment, breathing it in. The peace. The freedom. The feeling of enoughness. So many times over the past 2 years I doubted myself. I'd curled up in the dark wondering if I was crazy, if I'd somehow caused the implosion of my life, if maybe I really was the unstable one his mother made me out to be. But not anymore. Now I stood tall, not because I hadn't been broken, but because I'd put myself back together, piece by painstaking piece. I no longer needed Jonathan's validation, his love, or his apologies. I didn't need his mother's approval or anyone else's permission to be whole again. I had given myself what they never could: truth, compassion, and the courage to start over. And I did it all while being the mother my daughter deserved. My daughter came running back and threw her little arms around my legs. "Mommy, can we go on the carousel again?" "Of course, baby," I said, lifting her into the air, "as many times as you want." We rode it together, round and round, spinning like time itself, except this time, I was holding on and I wasn't letting go. Later that evening I received a letter. A legal one. It was from Jonathan's attorney. He had decided not to pursue custody or visitation anymore. He was stepping back for the child's well-being. That was the phrase they used: sterile, rehearsed, strategic. But I read between the lines. He had finally accepted what I knew all along. He didn't deserve to be in her life. And he never would again. I sat with that letter in my hands, and instead of feeling anger or grief, I felt relief. Closure. A chapter ending with a full stop, not a comma. There would be no more appeals, no more manipulations, no more surprises. Just silence. And peace. As for his mother, her social circle crumbled. Once seen as a pillar of grace and family values, she was now a pariah in her neighborhood. Turns out, trying to steal a woman's child based on a forged DNA test doesn't play well with church committees and garden club luncheons. I heard she'd moved away, quietly, shamefully, after being forced off her HOA board and publicly shunned. Good. Let her start over somewhere else. Let her carry the weight of her lies in the quiet she so smugly thought I'd never escape. I never reached out. Never responded. Some people don't deserve closure. Some doors should stay closed. Bolted shut. My healing didn't come from their apologies. It came from rebuilding a life without them in it. These days I live in a small but beautiful home just outside the city. My business has grown. I've even been featured in a local magazine. The article's title read, "From Broken to Bold: One Mother's Journey to Reclaim Everything They Tried to Take." It made me cry when I saw it in print. Not because I was sad, but because I was proud. Proud of the woman who clawed her way out of the shadows. Proud of the mother who refused to give up. Proud of the fighter in me who knew, deep down, that the truth would come out. And it did. In courtrooms, in headlines, in whispered apologies from those who once doubted me. But more importantly, it came out in the way I laugh again. The way I sleep at night without fear. The way I watch my daughter dance barefoot in the living room with glitter on her cheeks and joy in her bones. They tried to steal my motherhood. They tried to erase my voice. They tried to make me doubt my own truth. But I rose anyway. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that I was always right. If you're a mother reading this, if someone's ever made you feel like you were losing your grip, your child, your reality, I want you to know, you are not crazy. You are not alone. And you are not powerless. You don't need permission to fight for your child, your truth, your dignity. You just need your voice. And the courage to use it. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please like, comment, share, or subscribe. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life and lets others know they're not alone either. New episodes drop daily, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Because in a world full of villains hiding behind masks, the truth has a way of shining through, one story at a time.